Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my humble abode. So today, we will look at Skinwalker stories that will frighten and terrify you. I hope you enjoy them. Let's begin, and always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
Skinwalker at the gas station. This story belongs to a friend of mine. He told me this once, and I simply have to tell it. My friend is of Wixinox heritage, a Native American tribe who settled the Pacific Northwest coast. He is quite the character. For one, he is a whopping 6'10 and has the blackest eyes you could imagine. He always has this frowning face going on, which makes him even more intimidating. He is everything but a bad guy. In fact, he is the most gentle of giants. He was working at a gas station up north back in 1992, and he pretty much always worked the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. when he was relieved. Business wasn't exactly booming at nights, so he was usually watching TV or reading magazines between customers, and there were few. The area he lived and worked in was deeply associated with all things Native American. There was a potent sense of pride in the surrounding communities, but also a very distinct presence of superstition and old traditions. My friend was no exception. He was a firm believer of the ways of the old. This made his encounter even more terrifying. One night, he was sitting as usual watching TV when a customer entered the gas station. The customer paid for his gas, a pack of smokes, and some soda, and returned to his car. Nothing unusual. But as my friend looked out the window toward the customer's car, he spotted what looked like a huge dog sitting by the edge of the woods. Now, the window is located on the side of the building, some distance from the sliding door, overlooking the pumps and the roof covering it. On the sides of the roof are pretty strong halogen lights, which shine into the gas station. This gives the gas station not only an eerie lighting with the blinds casting long striped shadows, but also blinds the teller to an extent. As he peered through the window, trying to focus on the dog, it was gone. He didn't think much of it, even if it was a wolf. He was inside, and wolves don't tend to rob gas stations at night. Wolves were common here, but this wolf was huge. He brushed it off and returned to his mindless watching of the TV. A couple of hours go by, and not a single customer has entered since the last one. He was just about to refill some condiments when he heard a large thud coming from the back. It wasn't inside. He could hear that, but it came from the back, and behind the building they keep the garbage. The gas station had been visited before by scavenging homeless, but my friend didn't really care. It wasn't his garbage, and it was just garbage. Let them take it. But it kept getting noisier. He decided to grab a flashlight and a gun from the office and circle around the back to tell whoever ventured there to leave. As he had had enough, his presence alone would have scared off anyone, but he wanted to feel safe just in case. He exited through the sliding doors, walking past the window he just was sitting by. As he turned the corner, he shines the light towards the dumpsters. As the cone of light hits the dumpsters, my friend instantly drops the flashlight and the gun. It's the huge dog he saw before, scouring through the garbage. It wasn't a dog though. It clearly stood on its hind legs, reaching the same height as himself. It couldn't be a bear, as it was too gaunt. The creature's eyes had been glowing in the light of the flashlight, making it even more terrifying. He ran inside the gas station and he wasn't followed. He locked the door, stayed inside the whole night, and quit the next day. My friend is still convinced that he saw a skinwalker, a shape-shifting shaman of sorts that are common occurrences in Native American lore and culture. So sorry for the absence of blood, guts, and glory. It's just a really creepy, creepy story. So you guys like Skinwalker stories? I have a quick one for you. I'm dying, Navajo, and boy have I heard a lot of stories growing up on the reservation. While I've never seen anything myself, which I am grateful for, I have benefited by being around the people who have. There is a different kind of evil that exists in the quiet, high deserts and deep sandstone canyons of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, even Colorado, in the southern Ute area. I can only describe it as an ancient evil now. There are helpful ceremonies, rituals, and traditions that are still practiced to this day. Hell, even a local hospital has an on-duty medicine man, but it seems to be a double-edged sword. What I mean is there is also black magic, which most dying will not even acknowledge or speak of. We are very superstitious and are heavy with taboos. You will find this with most First Nation people. From Alaska to Argentina, it's just something you don't do, in fear that it will get the attention of unwanted spirits or harmful beings. Skinwalkers or naaldlooshii are just a few stories that kept me up at night with the covers over my head. Here is a quick one for you guys. A Navajo tribal police officer was driving west on what used to be officially named Highway 666. It was lightly snowing, maybe a quarter inch, which is a lot of snow for home, and he sees an old woman walking on the side of the road. How she got there or where she was going was not apparent, because she was so far out in the middle of nowhere, he didn't see her right away. But as he passes, he notices that she is dressed in traditional clothing, a shawl dress, moccasins, and her hair is in the traditional bun. Not too old, many and the elders still choose to dress traditionally. But why was she out in such cold weather this late at night, hitchhiking? Maybe he passed her too quickly and now has to return around. And as he makes a U-turn, he notices she is nowhere to be seen. This is fairly flat terrain, and he for sure seen an old woman walking. He pulls the squad car over and steps out with his flashlight. Confused, he manages to find the woman's footprints in the shallow snow. He follows the footprints until they suddenly turn into what looks like dog footprints, leading away from the road in a hurry. He immediately jumps back into the squad car and meets up with another officer near his patrol. He is a little shaken up, but asks the other officer if he has ever seen anything like that. The officer tells him that he has. He also explains that sometimes it's an old woman, sometimes a very beautiful young girl, but always on that road and always in snow, waiting for the right good Samaritan to let her in to that car. I still got nervous driving those wide open spaces at night. I kept my eyes strictly on the road and turned my music up high. I rarely pick up hitchhikers, but I never pick them up at night. My Skinwalker story, Arizona. Okay, so to start out, I live in Mesa, Arizona, which is basically Phoenix, Arizona. Because the main cities of Arizona spread out into many cities with no border in between. Mesa is what I would call the suburbs of Phoenix. I changed my name, of course. I live in an apartment complex I would describe as close to the ghetto, but still nice. I live in a bedroom, one bathroom apartment inn with my girlfriend. Arizona is a state full of ancient Native American history. I live next to a Hokum Canal, as do my Arizonians. The whole place used to be cities of ancient Native Americans. The point is, I'm in the area for what I believe to be a skinwalker. I'll get to my story. Yesterday I was drinking, one of the things I picked up during the COVID-19 quarantine, or what's enforced here, and decided to smoke a bowl on my apartment patio, which I don't usually do, mind you. I just finished loading up my pipe and taking the first hit when I hear a voice somewhere nearby. Amanda, open the door, please. It was a young, probably in the 20s girl who was talking, and it sounded calm and teasing. It continued on as I tried to ignore it, smoking my last bud. After about 4 times of it repeating itself, my curiosity caused me to look for the source. I saw an apartment building facing across from me movement. I saw a dog standing on his hind legs, leaning on a door, tapping. At first I shrugged, of course. Then I hear the voice again. It sounded exactly the same as last time. Exactly the same, as if you recorded their voice and that sentence and replayed it once again. There wasn't any other sound or movement in the complex. I watched the thing knock on Amanda's door for like 30 seconds, in what I would call a state of shock and curiosity. Then it stopped and didn't move for another 20 seconds. Until the dog thing stood all the way up, away from the doorway on its hind legs and turned to face me. It made eye contact with me, which is weird because we were at least 50 yards away. I'm on the 3rd floor, it's on the 2nd, but I felt it looking at me. I held this eye contact. I was so scared. I felt like I should run. Then it got on all fours and headed down the stairs slowly. At the bottom, it started slowly walking over to me. I was on all fours now, about to go inside or scream. I don't know, but I had to know what this thing was going to do. It walked close to my balcony. Yes, it was a dog. A brownish yellow dirty looking thing with big eyes that were 100% attentive to mine. It didn't seem natural, to be honest, but nothing looked wrong at a glance, except that it was staring into my eyes and wouldn't stop. I ran inside as it reached the bottom of my stairs and locked my doors. Soon I heard clawing at my door, doggy clawing. Next I heard the door handle jiggle. Then it started on my porch door. I of course never answered. Instead, I hid behind my kitchen counter with a knife. After about 30 minutes, it left. I stayed up all night, but I didn't see it again, and I didn't go out again. I'm hoping it doesn't come back. I haven't gone outside at night again. I'm burning sage and trying to be careful as I can. Skinwalker birthday surprise. I live on a reservation. I'm almost 19 now. I was 17 at the time. And it's always been a standing rule that we can't leave our house after sunset. There's always been bad things happening. People going missing, animals going missing, animals showing up, and mutilated animals. Weird stuff. I was allowed to have a few friends over for my birthday party. I was really excited because this land is beautiful, and I would always like to show it off. 3 of my friends made it up here, 2 boys and a girl. I'll just refer to them as boy 1, etc. We went for a long walk up the mountain a little ways from the rest because the view up there is amazing, and even though it was getting on dusk, I figured we'd be fine. There's 4 of us all in a group together, and we've got hiking sticks with the space at the end, and it's only a 20-minute walk there and back. Boy 1 saw the end of a goat, but it was missing a tail, and it looked injured. We tried to get closer to see if it was alright, because all the goats around these parts are owned, but as we got closer, it made a really loud, low bleat and ran over the bridge. Boy 1 and I ran off the track after it, I looked over the ridge. It disappeared. We stopped so we could hear which direction it was running to, but there was no noise at all. I thought it was a bit weird, and the sun was disappearing faster than I thought, so we started to head back. My friends would always laugh at the rules my family has about going outside at night, but they were about to find out why we have that rule, and I was about to get a fresh reminder. Boy 1 was leading us with his phone light. It wasn't that dark that we couldn't see in front of us, but the trail has drops and rocks, and because of the bushes the size of us, it made it really hard to see our feet. There was this giggle in front of us. We stopped because it was really close. It sounded like a turkey gobble, which is uncommon in my area. It happened a few more times after that. The sound gave me goosebumps because it didn't sound right at all. The next thing we saw still plays with my head. Going from left to right across the path was this thing. My heart jumped into my throat. It looked like a large coyote, but its limbs were mutilated like it was crossed between a human with sharp long claws. Its face looked distorted and human, but it was animalistic at the same time, and it had really long teeth. The scariest part is the way it moved. It was rocking back and forth on all fours, like a praying mantis. It just take a step, and rock backwards and forwards, and then lurch another step forward. Its head was bowed down in between its shoulders. None of us moved for what seemed like a couple of minutes, just watching it jolt itself across the path. It looked like it was going to go past us and leave us alone, until the girl started crying and freaking out. The animal flung its head in her direction and made a really low growl, sort of like a house cat, because it had that voice behind it as well. It twisted its body around and started coming at us. It was terrifying. I yelled and threw down my spear at its head, but it was like it bounced off. When it got to me, it stood up. It was so tall. It barged into me, making me fall down. It started hiccuping and lurching, and then it barged into boy 1. It backed into boy 2, and he landed in a ditch just off the trail. There was hardly any light on us now. When it got to the girl, it contorted its body over the top of her and held her down. She started screaming. Boy 2 got up and hit it with his hiking pole hard. It jolted away up the path behind us, making a crying noise, almost like it was mocking the girl. It was playing with us. We picked ourselves up and ran as fast as we could back down the path and across the reservation to my place. We told my mum what happened, and she told me and my friends the legend of the Skinwalkers. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept waking up to a crying sound outside that would stop just as my ears adjusted to being awake. I don't want to look outside my curtains. I never want to see its face again. The girl said when it was on her, it was hissing in her ear, and it was whispering things to her that she didn't understand. I still get nightmares. Is my new kitten actually a skinwalker? Hi guys, I'm having some trouble making up my mind about this. Just a heads up, I'm Norwegian, so my grammar and spelling might not be perfect. So I'll just start the story from the beginning. I live a bit outside of town, and I like walking in the forest almost daily to clear my mind and just take in nature. Well, obviously I sometimes see animals, and sometimes I come across injured animals, but if I see it necessary, I bring them home and nurse them back to health. A couple of weeks ago on my walk, I heard some squeaking a bit off of the trail. I went to see what it was and I found a kitten, practically newborn. I wasn't really sure what to do. The mum should be around somewhere, right? I reluctantly kept walking, worried that the mother might not come back if I stuck around. Maybe she was getting food or something. I stayed within earshot though, because I didn't want the kitten to be snatched up by a predator or freeze to death or something. I waited for about an hour, I think, before I decided that the mother probably abandoned it. I walked over to it, bent down, and started talking in that high pitched voice everyone does around any kind of baby. Its eyes weren't open yet, but it moved its head towards my voice and tried to crawl towards me. I noticed that it didn't have a tail. I checked for any injury, but just like it was born without it. Maybe that's why the mother left it. I gently picked it up, walked home with it inside of my jacket to keep it warm, got in my car, and drove to the vet. I told the vet how I found it, and she started checking it out. She told me that it was a girl and that she seemed healthy, except from the lacking tail, of course. But that shouldn't be a big problem. Her balance might be affected, but since she's born without it, she'll get used to it easily. She asked me if I was planning on keeping her, and I said yes, obviously. The little furball was adorable. The vet helped me with some formula and basic stuff for it. Litter box, food ball, etc. She registered us in the system. I named her Shira. She congratulated me on my new kitten and I left, happy about having some life in my apartment again. Shira is growing fast, and after just a few days, it started to show that this isn't a normal house cat, but a bobcat. I don't really know what to do. I'm supposed to take her back to the veterinarian soon for vaccines, but I cancelled the appointment and said that she didn't survive. Bobcats are obviously wild animals, and it's legal in Norway to take in a wild animal in need of help for a short while before releasing it. But Shira knows nothing about being wild. She wouldn't survive on her own. If I take her back to the vet, she'll be put down, and I've already fallen in love with my little goofball. I'm not planning on keeping her as an inside cat though. She'll come and go as she pleases. But most likely, she'll always need me to make sure that she's well fed and healthy. You're probably thinking I'm crazy for wanting to take care of a bobcat and letting her into my house whenever she wants. But I've had cats before, and there is this special bond of trust when you take care of a cat practically from birth. I know I'm dragging on and you want to hear about the Skinwalker, and I'm getting there. I just wanted you to know everything from before I started suspecting. A couple of days ago now, she opened her eyes, and seeing her eyes scared the shiz out of me. Her eyes are human, like you can see the white around the pupils. I've had several cats before, never a bobcat of course, but I'm pretty sure the eyes aren't supposed to look like that. It's not just like small cat pupils, it's definitely the eyes of a human. And that was when all the Skinwalker stories I've read and heard come crashing into my mind. The lack of tail and the human eyes are repeated in several stories. Don't ask me how a Skinwalker would end up in Norway though. I thought it was a Native American thing. She's pretty much like any other kitten though. Playful and innocent. She needs me and I guess I need her too. I don't really have anyone else. I don't care if people don't believe me. In fact, I'd prefer if you don't. But I need advice. So if you could just pretend to be part of a movie or something. What advice would you give? Is there anything I can do to go check to confirm if Shira is a Skinwalker or not? Has anyone ever had a friendly meeting with a Skinwalker? Maybe taken care of an injured animal who turned out to be a Skinwalker? I need someone to talk about this. But because of legal reasons, I can't talk to anyone here just because she's a bobcat. And I don't want her to get cut open and experimented on if people find out that she's a Skinwalker. If she actually is. So I thought, why not turn to the wonderful Reddit community? The only thank you I can give is to keep you updated on her, how she developed, and whatever I find out. If she doesn't kill me, of course. I don't think she will though. She seems like she trusts me. The Skinwalker's house. I want to share this story because someone might find it useful. But I share this information, urging you to be extremely careful, and I beg you to never use it unless you find that you must. During my freshman year of college, I lost control, mostly due to freedom from my parents and a group of friends who were more interested in a good party than a good grade. I spent more time sleeping and drinking than I did in class or studying. But all of that changed when I woke up in the hospital bruised and covered in cuts. I was told I had been in a car accident that night. I and two others were driving home from a party when the car crossed into the center divider, rolling several times and tossing all of us from the car. Miraculously, I escaped the crash with some scrapes and bruises, but mostly unharmed. The other guy in the car, Michael, broke his arm and got a bad concussion. However, the third occupant, a girl named Sam, was tossed in front of the rolling car and crushed underneath it. It took a rescue crew 4 hours to extricate her from underneath the crumpled mess of metal, and by the time they got to her, she was beyond saving. The police had no idea who was driving during the crash, and I couldn't remember anything about that night due to my state of impairment. Michael and I got stiff warnings about driving while intoxicated or getting into a car with a drunk person. But other than that, we got off scot-free. My friends all said that Sam had been driving and that I was so effed up I couldn't even walk, let alone drive a car. Despite their reassurances, I was haunted by guilt and uncertainty. Had I been driving when we wrecked? Why did I survive? Was I responsible for her death? Every night, I had nightmares of Sam calling for me from underneath her twisted metallic grave. I stopped leaving my dorm, stopped answering my phone, consumed by guilt and uncertainty. After a month of moping around my dorm, a friend of mine named Mark reached out. We talked for hours about my uncertainty and how I would never get answers. In response, he told me about the legend of the Skinwalker's house, a ramshackle green shack right off of Highway 380. Here a person could meet with the ancient beings and make deals and bargain, including asking questions that otherwise could not be answered. At first, I was incredulous. I thought Mark was messing with me, trying to play a sick prank, but I was desperate to know. So I talked to some friends who had grown up on a nearby reservation. One of them put me in touch with a tribal elder named Richard, and after a few emails and lying about doing a research project, Richard told me about summoning a Skinwalker, which the Navajo call naaldlooshii. When we first spoke, Richard was hesitant to talk about the subject, but after repeated calls and a face-to-face meeting, Richard explained the ritual to summon a Skinwalker. As we finished our conversation, Richard warned me that when one makes a bargain with a witch, the witch always takes something in return. I will give you the same warning that Richard gave me. naaldlooshii is not to be summoned or questioned on a whim. Please do not summon a Skinwalker unless you are ready to accept the consequences of your actions. If you decide to disregard my warning, you will need the pelt of a coyote, 4 animal fat candles, a rosary that has been blessed by a priest, a liter of animal blood, and a crow's feather. Skinwalkers are most active right after sundown, when there is a storm coming in from the southeast. The house where you can meet them is between mile marker 13 and 14. It's not hard to find. It took 3 months to find everything and for the perfect weather system to arrive. Mark and I drove together to the house around 5. Just as the sun began to sink underneath the Magdalens, Shadows ooze from the dilapidated house, its spruted green paint peeling off of the bleached bones of wood. The house had no windows or doors remaining, and I could smell the mildew and rot from the road. Mark and I climbed through the barbed wire fences in front of the house and made our way in as storm clouds rolled in, bringing with them peals of angry thunder. As we stepped inside, the smell of all rotting wood overwhelmed me, and I fought the urge to vomit. As we sat down on the striped wooden floor, we spread out the coyote pelt with the head facing me, placing the greasy wax candles at the end of its paws. We then placed the crow's feather in the mouth of the coyote pelt. After setting up the pelt and lighting the candles, Mark left the house and parked the car at a turn off a mile up the road. When I was sure he was gone, I took the rosary in my hands and pulled hard, scattering the bees across the floor and pelt. I sat down at the head and took the goat's blood I had procured from a butcher and dumped it across the pelt, spattering myself and the ground in dark maroon splatters. The storm continued its steady progression across the desert, and the roar of thunder rumbled in my chest. I closed my eyes and focused on the sound of the storm, willing the creature towards me. I was lost deep in my focus when I heard it. A wolf's low howl mixed with the screams of a woman, a horrible cacophony of animal and man swirling together. I opened my eyes to see the human breath in fog, the supernatural mist surrounding a house, but not permitting the structure itself. I heard a deep, guttural chant coming from behind me as the creature approached the dilapidated wooden structure. Then came the footsteps. Heavy padding steps crunched against the gravel behind me, quickly followed by the creak of wood as it stepped into the house. Its hot breath stung at the back of my neck as it sniffed me before circling in front of me. It had taken the form of a huge grey wolf, far bigger than even myself. The legs were too long and spindly, the hide patchy and balding, and its ears were short and tattered. The Skinwalker sat across the pelt from me and stared at me like I was a rabbit about to be devoured. Its eyes were unlike those of wolves, with dark brown iris, angry white sclera, and round pupils. Suddenly the wolf let out a pained yelp and began to shudder. The braying whimpers of the animal filled the house as the fur and skin began to slow off the screen. The flesh sizzled and popped like frying meat as the body began to disintegrate, quickly followed by the opening of the chest cavity as a woman crawled out of the quickly decomposing wolf carcass. She had Native American features with skin so wrinkled and scarred I couldn't even guess her age. Hair hung in black stingy strands, and worst of all, her lips were stretched and mangled so that her mouth could never close fully. She wore a patchwork of skins and pelts and a pair of antlers atop her head. Even sitting, she was nearly a head taller than me. She locked eyes with me, inhuman, horizontal slits like a goat's peering out from behind the mess of hair that hung around her face. Her voice croaked in her throat, and a harsh, guttural dialect spewed forth from her lips. My heart sank. How could I have been so stupid? Why would an ancient Navajo witch speak English? She must have noticed my disappointment, because she reached for a pouch on her belt and took out some sort of grey, waxy substance. She spread it on the tips of her index fingers, leaned forward, and jammed her fingers into my ears, her long, dirty fingernails scratching my ear canal. I yelled in pain and surprise at the intrusion, and she shifted her weight back into a sitting position. For a split second, my hearing faded before the sound of the storm surged back to life with a loud crack. The old woman locked eyes with me again, her face lit by the flickering candlelight. She spoke again, this time in English. I have given you the gift of hearing. What is it you seek from I who goes on all fours? Her voice low and raspy, like sandpaper on stone. My voice caught in my throat, my gut tightening at her words as I began to drift into a daze. I pushed my fingernails into the flesh of my palm until I could focus again. When I did answer, my voice was weak and uncertain. I need to know if I killed her. She cackled, her voice spiraling to a crescendo until she sounded like a coyote baying at its frightened rabbit. Very well, Bayalagana, I can help you, but what have you brought for me? My stomach twisted painfully again as fear clawed at the back of my mind. I haven't brought anything to give you. Very well. If you have nothing to give, then I must take. Do you agree to these terms? I paused for a minute, considering what Richard had told me, but my guilt overwhelmed my rationale, and I shakily nodded and my head in agreement to her terms. The Skinwalker smiled at this, revealing rows of miscellaneous teeth in her carnivorous, distorted mouth. The teeth were inhuman, with sharp wolf-like canines mixed in with broad, flat teeth like a horse, in a horrible conglomeration of strained rows of ivory shards. The laughter came again from her lips, horrible coyote cackling that made my skin crawl. After another round of laughter, she produced a crude stone knife from her belt and with a quick motion ran it across the palm of my hand, spilling dark rivers of blood onto the pelt before reaching towards me. I extended my hand, and she dug the cruel stone into the soft flesh of my palm. My silky skin cried out in agony, and blood wept from the exposed flesh underneath. She clasped my bleeding hand with inhuman strength and pressed my wound against her own. Our blood mixed, and I felt it trickle down my arm and pool at the crook of my elbow. The woman began to chant and stared into my eyes as blood continued to flow freely down our arms onto the pelt between us. Her voice grew rough and animalistic as she continued her chanting. As suddenly as she had started, she stopped and let go of my now throbbing hand. Oh, Bialgana, how foolish you have been, just like your forefathers with their drink and their endless cruelty. But her blood is on her own hands. Her foolish pride gave way to steel and glass. I have given you your answer, and now I will take two things from you. I take from you naaldlooshii, your dreams. A wave of relief washed over me. I could live without dreams anymore. My dreams had been playing with visions of Sam calling out for help from beneath her metallic tomb, begging for my help. With inhuman strength and speed, the Skinwalker grabbed my hand again and brought it to its mouth. I pulled hard against his grip and yelled to no avail as it pushed my thumb into its mouth. Hard teeth clamped down hard against the appendage, tearing away the flesh and bone of my thumb. Blood sprayed from the wound, painting a sanguine picture on its face. The creature chewed, and I could hear the crack of bone and squelch of soft flesh in its teeth. I screamed in agony, clutching my hand and pressing the wound to my chest. My vision faded and blurred as I slumped to the floor. I wish I had gone unconscious. I wish I had closed my eyes. Instead, I watched as the Skinwalker tore at the flesh of its face, its long claw-like fingernails shredding through skin and muscle. The Skinwalker grabbed the skin on its arm and pulled, tearing it away from the muscle underneath, the flesh coming away like wet newspaper. I watched the muscles of its arms bulge and flex as it tore away the soft skin on its stomach, disemboweling itself. A grey coil of intestines lolled out of the abdomen, dragging against the roof wooden floor. It continued tearing away its flesh until only scraps remained on a skeletal frame. I willed my eyes to close, but they would not. I stared transfixed on the horrifying visage in front of me. The figure dropped to all fours and pulled one of the pelts it was wearing over its face. The pelt stretched and contruded, spreading over the skeletal limbs. The figure trembled and shook, twitching unnaturally. Then it began to grow, the limbs stretching and contorting, the chest becoming narrower. I watched as two sets of large antlers splintered out of the top of its head, stopping just before the ceiling. The figure continued to shift and contort until finally a massive bull elk stood in front of me. It strode out of the house, then paused and looked down at me. We locked eyes for just a moment before it let out a loud bulge and took off into the night. I pulled off my shirt and wrapped it tightly around my still bleeding hand. I staggered out of the house and glanced around, afraid the creature was waiting for me outside. There was nothing except for the rumble of thunder and the throbbing in my hand. I walked the mile to where Mark had parked the car, all the time pleading with my body to not bleed out. Mark paled when he saw me and rushed me to the hospital. I told the staff at the hospital that I had been messing with all farm equipment, a story they bought easily enough. In spite of everything that happened, I felt relieved with the knowledge that I hadn't killed Sam. The Skinwalker kept its word. It did take my dreams, because now I dream not about Sam, but instead about the Skinwalker. I dream of the Skinwalker changing and shifting. I watch time and time again as it tears apart animals for its dinner. The worst is when it attacks people, as I am forced to watch as it stalks hikers and campers. I watch as it disembowels them, mounts their bodies onto tree limbs, or skins them alive. I don't go into the woods anymore, for fear that I may see that thing again. But now and then, as I drift off to sleep, I hear the sound of an elk bull, followed by peals of coyote cackling.
Well, my children, I thank you all for listening. I hope these stories frightened and terrified you, because I love the smell and taste of fear. I'll see you again very soon. So until then, love the darkness, as it always follows.